This is Brian, screenfiles.com and review. And what I'm looking at today is 2023's The Tutor, directed by Jordan Ross. And while I don't tend to be a big thriller watcher, if one comes on, I will engage with it because it's a very horror-adjacent genre, or at least typically is. And so when I happened to stumble upon The Tutor on Netflix, I gave it a watch. And this movie, as far as I can tell, had a lot going for it. It stars Garrett Hedlund from Tron Legacy and Noah Schnapp from, I want to say, Stranger Things. So I was expecting at least a decently told story. And for the first half of it, that's exactly what I got. The story revolves around this tutor, played by Garrett Hedlund, who is tutoring this odd rich kid. And the rich kid seemingly becomes very obsessed with him, perhaps even dangerously so, and begins to intrude upon other aspects of the tutor's life, which creates this conflict. That's a good movie. Now keep in mind, that's also a movie you've seen before. I certainly have, but that's not a criticism. Because if something is done well, you tend to see it repeated in various forms. If it would have just stuck to the story of a young person being obsessed with his tutor, that would have been a good movie. It wouldn't have been groundbreaking, to be sure, but it could have been a very good movie. But unfortunately, The Tutor doesn't do that. It takes that initial seed and grows into something so silly and outlandish that it's almost as if it becomes an entirely different movie. Now keep in mind, I also have nothing against stories that are outlandish. Hell, I love horror and science fiction, which are filled to the brim with outlandish and oftentimes ridiculous stories. But the key of it is that the story has to make sense within the world depicted in the movie. If that happens, you can get as weird as you want. It's perfectly okay because you're not breaking any rules, so to speak. But the case of The Tutor, as I said, it starts off one movie and turns into another one entirely. And maybe a better director could have pulled that off. It reminds me, in fact, oddly enough, of Shutter Island in some respects. Now keep in mind, Shutter Island was directed by Martin Scorsese. Jordan Ross is not Martin Scorsese. And when this twist happens, for me, the movie kind of just fell apart because it wasn't only silly, it was unwarranted. If the movie had stuck with what happened in, I want to say, the first half, it would have been very Fatal Attraction-ish, and that's perfectly okay. As I said, no problem with that. That you had a young male fixating on an older male changes the dynamic somewhat. It would have worked, and was working by my reckoning, but they just decided to go another way entirely. It's somewhat ironic to me that the movie is called The Tutor because there are lessons that filmmakers could have learned, but refused to. This movie is frustrating, and it's not even bad. It's just irritating because, as I'm strongly implying, things are happening that don't need to happen. And if they are going to happen in that fashion, you need to set it up better. You just don't do it, which, by my reckoning, the director kind of did. It changes the whole dynamic of the movie. And I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's worth seeing, if only to illustrate what you perhaps shouldn't do, unless you can do it really, really well. So what do you think? This is Brian with screenfiles.com and review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.